Hello, Glenn.
Hi.
So, you kind of are the resident canal historian at the Berks County Heritage Center.
I've been accused of that.
So we figured today we could kind of ask about some of the bigger objects in our collection, such as the dolphin, Mildred, which is in the back of the barn, and also the lock shanty. My name is Jessica Chernich, and I spent my summer interning at the Berks County Heritage Center in Wyomissing, Pennsylvania. The Berks County Heritage Center is located on 18 acres of farmland along the Tolpahawken Creek, as well as the Union Canal, whose towpath has been converted into a trail for running, walking, and biking. The site includes several of the outlying farm buildings, as well as a bank barn that was built in 1947 following a barn fire that destroyed a previous barn. One of the featured sites is, of course, the Gruber Wagon Works, which was moved 5 miles downstream in 4 separate pieces by the Army Corps of Engineers in 1976. It has since been restored and turned into a tourism destination as an example of early American wagon production, as well as a demonstration of a business that adapted with the ever-changing tide of industrialization. The barn, as I previously have mentioned, has been turned into a canal museum dedicated to Charles Howard Heister, who, due to his personal history with canals, developed a collection of canal memorabilia. As you can see behind me, the Gruber Wagon Works isn't set up like a traditional museum. It's actually in the same condition as it was when it was closed in 1972. One of the main responsibilities of anyone working at the Berks County Heritage Center is to be proficient in the history of all of the buildings on the site. So that's including the Canal Center and the Wagon Works, but also any of the outlying farm buildings, as I mentioned previously. So whether you're spending most of your time at the house or in the snack bar or the country store, everyone has to be able to give a tour at any given time. Along with tours, I also developed a plan to transfer the Heritage Center cassette collection. I didn't have any prior knowledge, but I enjoyed researching different ways to accomplish this. Upon completion, I had written a brief recommendation report based on my research, as well as instructions on how to transfer the cassettes to the computer. I spent the earlier part of my internship on this research, but come later on, a bulk of my time was spent on a lengthy oral history project that surrounded the knowledge of one of our volunteers, Glenn Wenrick. Glenn knows everything there is to know about canals, and Becky Hughes, who is the cultural programs supervisor, thought it would be a good idea to include a transcript on how he gives traveling trunk programs, which are programs where we take supplies to schools or nursing homes, and we provide talks on location. Glenn is the only one who knows what Glenn would say during a traveling trunk program. So if a volunteer or another staff person would have to take over for him, they really wouldn't know what he has prepared. So one of the bigger things that I did during my internship was to sit down and record Glenn giving an example traveling trunk presentation. Myself and a few of my coworkers sat down with him, and so we could ask questions and different things like that to kind of mimic a presentation of that caliber. And then afterwards I transcribed the entire recording from beginning to end, and it now sits inside of the traveling trunk program manual that Becky Hughes has on reserve for any volunteer who might need to read up on what to say during a program. I also put together a list of different main points that Glenn made throughout his presentation, so it's a little bit easier to follow. I spent a lot of time doing oral history, which I was not expecting, but I am glad I did. I actually developed an oral history manual based on my assigned readings. It has been added to the manual collection in the archives for use in future projects. As a follow-up to this, I completed one final interview with Glenn where I went over some of the larger artifacts in our collection, which included the lock shanty behind me, the porthouse of the Dolphin, as well as Mildred the houseboat, which sits behind the Canal Museum today. This time, when I transcribed it, I followed my own instructions that I put together in the manual. Not that the last transcription wasn't proper enough to be archived, as this one was. Rather, it just fit into a different category. It was just a resource for volunteers and anyone else who would do a traveling trunk program. This one, as I am proud to say, I learned and I completed archiving the transcription. It is currently housed in the Berks County Heritage Center, and I also burned a disc of all the digital files, which included the recording of the interview.
Where I was lucky with my internship was that I managed to incorporate and learn a lot of things. I'm proficient in giving tours of the site, and I am also familiar with the Chen Hall cataloging system from spending time cataloging different artifacts.
I've also managed to complete an oral history project. I am by no means considering myself an expert, but I am confident that I understand the process and can appreciate its usage in the field of public history.
Finally, I think one of the most noteworthy things that I have strengthened at my internship has been adaptability. I know what my personal skills are outside of working. I can play music, I'm relatively creative, I know what I can do. So if it's a matter of me picking up my instrument and playing music for a history camp activity or designing knot tying boards for a canal program, the ability to find ways of doing things in a unique and creative way at a moment's notice is a pretty marketable skill to have.
In the end, the Berks County Heritage Center taught me a lot of things about my major. I'm not just a history major, I'm a public history major, and there's a certain degree of responsibility that you have to take as a public history major, and that to be able to teach people about a specific site, you need to be able to take maybe the big picture and crunch it down to the small picture, or vice versa even, if people are more familiar with international issues. I remember in my Intro to Public History class, my sophomore year of college, we were assigned to come up with an interpretive program based around a local site in our area. I chose a farmhouse that wasn't too far from where I live that was the location of a massacre during the French and Indian War. I constantly keep relating back to it and thinking back to that prompt and wonder how one could possibly interpret something and get people to appreciate something as benign as a little farmhouse. So during my internship, you kind of think about that, you know, how when I'm giving a tour can I get people to appreciate this tiny little wagon factory, especially people that aren't even from this area. And people are coming in from Georgia sometimes and other states just out of curiosity. So why should it matter to them?
Both the Wagon Works and Canal Center have national and even international connections. The trick is uncovering them. Public history is the method to getting this information to the masses. For example, the Grubers started off with hand tools. They meticulously carved wagon parts from wood. As time went on, power got more sophisticated. They moved to machines and modern technology. They adapted to the changing times however they could. The opposite can be said of canals. Times changed, and being the lowest form of power, they were promptly replaced with railroads. From taking different history classes, I know how to recognize the patterns of industrialization, and with a public history background, I know how to explain it.
I'm able to say with confidence that because I know the history, I've taken the classes, I put the time into reading, and in the end, I know why a certain period in history matters and what it means. Getting that information to the public is the second half, and this is something I have learned at my internship. Being able to relate on a whim why something should matter to them based on your own research, your readings, and your own interviews is a fascinating and magnificent ability to have. And being able to share that information to anyone is even better.